which was a huge, huge gift to our family.
Right.
He stayed in St. Paul, Minnesota, because a lot of people do. They don't want you to go back to your old friends and your old habits. So they really, he had a great life there. He was sober. He had a great job. He was managing a few GNC stores and was really doing well from, from what I could tell.
And had found someone he wanted to spend his life with.
Yes.
Which obviously gave him some sense of purpose. And especially if that person wasn't using, that's somebody that probably was helping him stay clean.
Yes. So he had met a woman in Chicago years before who they were very close friends. And she moved to Las Vegas and became a dancer and made great money out there. And then she started visiting Richard in St. Paul. And they fell in love and got engaged. And Richard had come out to me when he was 21 that he was gay. I had no idea. As close as we were, I had no idea. And, of course, he pulled the hi, Mom. He called me, Mom, I have a friend who's gay. Like, do you think his mom would want to know? Oh, gosh. And I was like, yes, I think his mom.
Asking for a friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm gay. And I was so relieved. I was so happy that he came out with this truth, because I felt like there was something in him that what was it?
Right.
That
so maybe this was what he was running from, didn't know how to handle, and maybe telling you this could really help him.
Yes, and it did. And he wanted advice on how to tell everybody. And we talked about it, and, we loved him, unconditionally, obviously. Yeah. So they got engaged, and it turns out that Maria was a transgender. So she was born Edward and made a full transition with all the surgeries. It was very, very, I thought she was a very, very brave person to do that, because it's so painful, and, there's just, you have to really, really want to make that change.
So he really connected with someone who had been through something. And
yes.
I'm sure that resonated with him, and that's part of their connection.
Yes.
It seems.
And I wondered, I didn't get a chance to ask him why he wasn't marrying a man, why he was marrying her, but I just didn't get the chance.
Right.
I think it's probably because sometimes it's easier, I've been told, to present as male and female. I believe that that's what it was for him, and he fell in love with her.
Right.
So he was very much in love with her, and so, he wanted to get married at our home in Lake Forest, Illinois, in the backyard, and I'm a little bit of a Martha Stewart kind of a girl. So I like to entertain, so I was thrilled. I was thrilled that he seemed to be getting better and making a nice life for himself, but I didn't want him to move to Las Vegas, because I kept telling him that, that's a place that you might not be able to stay sober.
Right. So at the time where things turn in your family, everything seeed great.
Everything seemed great. So
no red flags.
There were no red flags. There were green flags. It was him. He sent me the night before. He sent me a photo of himself wearing his topsiders. He was kind of a preppy dresser in his little Ralph Lauren shirt. And he said, grilling vegan sausages, listening to Barry White with some cheap box of wine, and it's a great day. And it was a great photo. And I thought, maybe my boy is taking these baby steps, maybe at a beautiful condo. They had a room for me, which I thought was cool. And it felt like he was finally finding his place.
Yeah.
Can I go forward?
Yeah.
The next day, his fiance found him taken by suicide. She called me, frantic, told me which hospital he went to. And I called the hospital and waited a long time. And the doctor got on and said, what do you know? And I said, I know he tried to, at the time, take his own life. And he said, there's no easy way to tell you that your son died tonight.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So let's talk about, I don't want to live in that space for very long,
No.
but I know that a lot of people have been through something like this, can understand what you were feeling in that moment. Can you just share a little bit about what it's like to get a call like that, to know that from that moment on, your life will never be the same?
I thought that the doctor was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of thinking, what is he talking about? What does that mean? I just thought he was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then part of me believed him because I went into shock for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did you end up telling your younger children?
They were in Nashville, Tennessee visiting their dad. So he had to tell them, and then they had to fly home.
Right.
And I remember my son saying, "Mom, why are you so calm?" And I don't know why. I think I never knew what shock was.
Yeah.
You're just kind of numb, and you're just kind of like a robot. But I have to tell you, so Richard was so funny that within 2 days after he died, he had us in stitches, which sounds weird. We went to the cemetery to pick out a spot. My mom and dad are divorced. My mom and dad were never in the same room together for like 26 years. They were both there holding my hands. My husband was there, and my ex-husband, Richard's dad, was there. And I'm looking around like, this is different. And we're looking, and we found a spot. And then my mom said, would you mind if I buy a spot? Oh, sure, Mom. I said to my husband, let's buy a spot too. Right here, we'll be together. And then my ex-husband says, oh, well, my wife doesn't care where we're buried. Let's, we'll be next to Tony. We'll smoke cigars. And then my dad said, well, there's a tree over here, but could they cut the roots of this tree so my wife and I could be over here? And my mom leaned over to me and she said, I'm going to be with my ex-husband and you're going to be with your ex-husband for eternity? And I looked up and I said, Richard, you just played out the funniest Seinfeld episode ever.
Absolutely.
And it was the only thing that made us laugh, to the point where when we were at home and someone would tell the story, like literally we were laughing, crying. It really brought us comic relief and
brought you together.
It brought us all together.
Yeah.
And he has since that day. We are together for all birthdays and celebrations.
That's amazing.
And he always wondered, why can't they be together? They should be together. Well, they're together now.
Right. So I want to talk about grief for a second. Everybody grieves differently depending on what they're going through, who they've lost, how the loss happens, but it's a universal feeling. And I think there are steps in that grief. Like you said, you don't believe it. Wait, this doesn't make sense. This can't be. Into stages where there's a lot of numbness and also fear of having regular things happen. Eating, is that okay? Laughing, is that okay? Feeling almost guilty about that stuff. When I was younger, I was 15, and I was at boarding school. I was at that therapeutic boarding school that I mentioned earlier. And it's interesting that you gave me something about butterflies because somehow in a conversation, there was a girl at the school whose father had died by suicide, now that I'm thinking about it. And she talked a lot about when you see a butterfly, it's a soul. And she came to get me during lunch, this girl, Jennifer. I haven't thought about this story in a long time. But Jennifer came at our lunch break at this therapeutic boarding school where there's rigid rules. And that's the only time you could run up to get extra clothes, a sweatshirt, whatever. And you have to always be accompanied by someone. And I was just old enough in the school, I'd been there a year and a half, so I could go by myself. So I ran up to the dorm, was getting a sweatshirt, and Jennifer walks in and says, Tim, the headmaster, wants to speak to you. So I walked down with her, and you have to walk down this path. And all these butterflies were circling around, and she stops. And she said, did you see that? And I said, yeah. And she was like trying to hold in tears because she knew what they were about to tell me, but I didn't, you know.
Oh.
And anyways, so I walk into my headmaster's room and he essentially says, your father died. Wow. And I didn't know how to take that. I was very quiet and, you know, it didn't hit me. And I'll just to fast forward the story, I remember for at least a month, and this was very similar when my fiance was killed. For at least a month, you know, you have so many people around you. You have so many things going on. It's hard to find a moment where you are just in that grief and that misery and that loneliness. And it with my father, especially, I remember it was like almost a month later, I was in the shower. And it just hit me out of nowhere, and I started crying, thinking this loss is really big. I'm going to go through my life without this person in my life. How do I do that, you know? And that was the first time I had to go through something like that as a young child, and that was a terrible loss, you know? And to this day, listen, I mean, I've done many things to kind of deal with the loss of having a fiance killed, losing a father to cocaine overdose, which, you know, essentially was an overdose, but really, you know, I think it was somewhat similar to a suicide in the way that he was killing himself. You know, he knew what could happen, and he did it for whatever reasons. He couldn't face the pain. He couldn't feel that pain, couldn't feel good in his own body, which I want you to hear from you because I know you say it in a great way, or in a way that people can understand. But and so that grief process for me has been many years. For many years, I avoided it. I ignored it. For many years, I flip-flopped that pain into other things. I ran in a different direction and ran from it. I got into terrible relationships from it. All these different things. But finally now, you know, I'm turning 50 this month. I've really learned what grief is, and you have to sit in it. You know, you have to live in it. And for me, I don't know that grief ever leaves. When I talk about losing my fiance, I was 26 at the time. You know, I've lived just as long, you know, now I'm going to be 50, like I said, and I was only with him. He was in my life for 3 years. It's taken this long, you know, the emotion is still in my throat when I talk about that loss.
Of course.
And who knows what would have happened if life had gone on. We could have been divorced, hated each other, never spoken again. But that grief can stump you in life. You can get stuck in it, and it can prevent you from living either the life that you could, should, want to. And for me, it was like stuck up here. Anyway, so I just wanted to share that with you about my lessons of grief. And I've learned you have to live alongside of it somewhat. You have to, it doesn't go away. You have to learn how to live with it. And also, it's interesting for me how to talk to people with it because, you know, there's so many people that are like, oh, what can I do? Can I, you know, let me know if I could do these things? For me, I've learned someone should just do it. You know, if they're going to bring the food, if they're going to drive you somewhere.
Don't ask because you will never say yes.
Right. And also, you know, those comments of like, oh, they're in a better place, that's not necessarily helpful.
That is, okay, so I 100% agree. First, I'd like to say I am so sorry for 2 unbelievably catastrophic losses in your life.
Thank you.
And it does take years. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
And sometimes we avoid the work, right? We put it in a box to the left and don't talk about it, don't think about it, and just, but it comes, and then it'll come crashing down on you. The things people say are unbelievable. Mm-hmm. People, I believe, have a great intention and a good heart. But the worst thing that someone said to me was, no one's getting out of here alive.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a terrible thing.
It's a terrible thing to say.
Well, we're all going to die.
We're all going to die, so you better get used to it.
Yeah, it would have happened at some point. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.